Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 230. Mount Jiao young man. If it was him, what would he do? Rebirth technique. He would want that person to be reborn. Mo Ran looked at Su Xuanglin, who was curled up in a ball on the ground, and said in a low voice, "You didn't expect Nangong Lu to be so vicious as to directly kill Luo Fenghua. In desperation, you simply beat him at his own game. You said that the curse on the ring was left by Luo Fenghua and instigated Nangong Lu to throw Luo Fenghua's corpse into the blood pool in accordance to Rufeng sect's rules and detain him to the 18th level of hell. Is he mad?" Xuemen was stunned. Since he wants Luo Fenghua to be reborn, he must treasure this person. Then why does he want to push him to the 18th level of hell? Because once a soul enters the purgatory, rebirth technique won't work anymore. Mo Ran looked at him with pity in his eyes. This way, Luo Fenghua won't be reincarnated immediately. You would have time to learn the method of rebirth and then get Luo Fenghua back. Then, you can build a utopia, a place where you are a god, a place that is fair and just in accordance with your standard. Su Xuanglin. After a few moments of silence, this person whose face was mostly festering suddenly laughed. He stared at Mo Ran's face. "Grandmaster Mo, I only found out today that you are actually a madman." He paused, and then said in an extremely soft voice, "Because only a madman can understand me." When he finished speaking, he laughed heartily. His laughter was like a bald vulture with wings. Although he was old, he still fiercely and stubbornly occupied the precipice and would not show the slightest bit of weakness until he died. Mo Ran closed his eyes, and said softly to him, "Nangong Su, listen, there are still people in this world who know the method of rebirth. If you are willing, I will do my best to plead with Master Huizhui of Wuobei Temple to return your Shizun's life." He opened his palm and handed the broken spiritual core back to Su Xuanglin. "But please, tell me." It was as if he was trying to grasp the last strand of floating grass to save his life. He frowned, and in a place where no one could see, there was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. "Please tell me, who is the person who has been secretly helping you?" Mo Ran said, "Who taught you this strange method of rebirth? Who taught you the Zhenlong chess formation?" Memories of his previous life surfaced in his mind. Amidst the chaos at the Rufeng sect, Su Xuanglin stood in front of Ye Wangzi, blocking his path as he died under his sword. Since this was the case, Su Xuanglin in his previous life had not had this specific plan before he died. But in this life, everything was different. Su Xuanglin had set up a trap in Jinjinj Lake early on. He designed the Peach Blossom Spring, caused the Heavenly Rift at Kaidi Town, and when the method of sacrificing people didn't work, he quickly reverted to another method using holy weapons. Until he finally managed to pull out Luo Fenghua out of the infinite hell. Such a method of rebirth was definitely not something that he came up with himself. "You want to know?" Su Xuanglin's eyes flashed with malice. "My skills were indeed taught by someone else, but I am not willing to tell you. Would you rather be his chess piece until you die?" "Chess piece?" Su Xuanglin smiled. "You are thinking too much. He understands me and knew my intentions. He is the same as me. Grandmaster Mo, you should give up. I will never tell you who he is. You went through so much trouble to come to Mount Jiao and you were so content to force me into a dead end, but so what? In the end, the world will still be in chaos. Smoke will rise everywhere, and the flames of war will be lit all over. He will still raise the upper and lower cultivation worlds to the ground, and turn them into scorched earth. After that, the good will be rewarded and the evil will be repaid. The capable will live high and the mediocre will be the slaves." The smile in Su Xuanglin's eyes grew brighter and brighter. "It's really the best scenario." Xuemen was furious. "What do you mean by the good will be rewarded, and the evil will be repaid? What do you mean by the capable will live high? Whether others are good or evil, capable or mediocre, is it up to you to decide? Those people you made into chess pieces outside, and Nangong Zhongying, and. He stole a glance at Chu Wanning's expression and couldn't help but lower his voice. And Nangong Si. Xuemeng looked very indignant and wronged. Are they willing to be controlled by you? Do they deserve to die? Sacrifices are always necessary. Su Xuanglin glanced at him indifferently. Young Master Xue, in the end, you're still too young. There was a kind of hesitation in his expression, as if he wasn't very willing to talk to Xuemeng, who had such an intense temperament. He turned his head back to Mo Ran. Since I've fallen into your hands, you can kill me or cut me up as you please. He even used a tone of understatement to say, I still have a lychee fruit in my kinkan bag. If you still don't feel satisfied, you can feed it to me. As he said this, he coldly sneered, in any case, when I was 20 years old, I was already put to death by 1,000 cuts by you so-called righteous people from famous clans. It won't hurt to do it again. Huang Xiaoyu said, who put you to death by 1,000 cuts? You're simply shameless to open your mouth to speak such lies. However, Mo Ran understood what Su Xuanglin meant. When he was 20 years old, the death by 1,000 cuts wasn't in his body, but in his soul. Nangong Su had also once devoted himself to learning martial arts. He once also had a kind heart. He had also once listened to his master's advice that he should be a gentleman for life and use his sword to kill evil. However, in that Lingshan Mountain Sword Conference, he had been cut into 1,000 pieces. Mo Ran closed his eyes. Seeing Su Xuanglin's miserable state, he didn't have much longer to live. Perhaps it was because he was too similar to him in his previous life. Even if there was hatred and resentment between them, at this moment, he actually couldn't bear it. He said, Luo Fenghua's spiritual core is still here. Why don't you use that rebirth technique again? Maybe you can see him again. Use it again. Su Xuanglin laughed. He looked at the spiritual core in his hand with interest, then looked at his flesh that was rapidly festering due to the lack of spiritual power. He said lazily, I'm going to die. If I die, there will be no fairness in this world. What's the use of him coming back? Isn't he still going to suffer and be bullied by you great sects? As he spoke, his eyes suddenly darkened. He actually crushed that spiritual core with his own hands. The fragments pierced into his palm. His hand became covered in blood. Mo Ran. Xuemeng, are you crazy? Everyone was also at a loss. Some were dumbstruck, some had ashen expressions and some had vigilant eyes. They all stared at that man on the ground who was neither human nor ghost. Su Xuanglin didn't pay attention to anyone. He looked at the last trace of Luo Fenghua in this world. He watched as it completely turned into ashes. Finally, he laughed loudly and cried. His face was covered in blood and tears as he laughed crazily. From now on, no one will ever see him again, no one will ever hate him again. They've all turned into dust, turned into ashes. Excellent, excellent. He slowly got up and walked forward while swaying under everyone's gaze. He walked to the front of the divine martial formation where there was a weapon. It was the Kong Hao. He sat down and used his charred and rotting fingers to pluck the strings a few times. The backlash of the Zhenlong chess formation became more and more serious. His 7 orifices began to bleed, and his fingers began to burn. In the end, his entire body was engulfed by the flames, but he still played the instrument in the midst of the fire. His expression seemed to be somewhat happy and relaxed, but that happiness and relaxation could no longer be seen. His skin and flesh were rapidly shrinking, curling, and shriveling. Raging flames deceive the heavens. Su Xuanglin's lazy voice came from the flames. That voice was calm and unruly, as if no amount of pain could affect him. No matter how close death was, it couldn't threaten him. It's best to be young and weak. Light hooves and fast horses, looking at all the flowers in the world. There were many older people in the crowd. Unexpectedly, in this languid and carefree tune, they suddenly thought of the young man at the Lingshan Mountain Sword Conference. He was dressed in green and had an upright appearance. That young man walked out of the dark tunnel, walked out of the wasteland of memories. He confidently stepped into the arena, carrying his sword that had been through hundreds of battles. His hands were full of calluses from practicing swordsmanship. He was so young, so handsome, so magnificent, and even a little arrogant. He glanced at the 10 great sect masters and the spectators who were cheering and hollering. Suddenly, he grinned. His smile was genuine. The young man in his early 20s stopped. His back was straight as he faced the arena that was filled with sunlight. Facing the bright future in his eyes, he cupped his fists and said, "Nangong Su of the Rufeng sect. Today is the first battle. I hope that the seniors will be generous with their guidance." In the end, things failed to live up to expectations. After a long time, the flames finally died down. Only 5 ownerless holy weapons were left on the soul summoning platform. There was also the rebirth array that had not completely disappeared yet. Whether it was Luo Fenghua or Su Xuanglin, they were both gone. Xue Zhenyang was somewhat in disbelief. He blankly opened his eyes and muttered, is it all over? Meatbun. Karma and reincarnation are all retribution. Master Xianjing of Wuobei Temple closed his eyes and put his palms together. He sighed deeply and said, "I hope that all the hatred in the world will return to dust." Xuemeng rolled his eyes at him. This old bald donkey hadn't put in much effort along the way, so he was quite good at shooting people behind their horses. What should we do next? He turned his head and asked his father, "Should we just go down the mountain like this? What about his accomplice? We still don't know who that person is." While they were talking, Zhang Shi suddenly shouted, "Be careful! Back off!" Everyone abruptly followed his gaze, only to see that the rebirth array had shrunk to the size of half a palm. It paused for a moment before expanding again at an astonishing speed. It was as though a wound had split open in the sky, and strands of distorted black smoke were gushing out from within. Xuemeng said in surprise, "What's going on? Su Xuanglin is dead. Shouldn't this rebirth array disappear with him?" Zhang Shi pinched his fingers and stared at the array for a moment. He cursed in a low voice, No. This isn't a corpse demon. It's not a rebirth array either. I'm afraid that we and Su Xuanglin have all been deceived." "What?" Xuemeng was shocked. "It's not a corpse demon, and it's not a rebirth array? Then what could it be?" Zhang Shi said angrily, "It doesn't matter what it is. The most important thing is to prevent this array from fully forming." In addition to him, the other masters also reacted quickly. In a flash, Chu Wanning, who didn't like to talk nonsense the most, took out Tianwen and attacked the center of the array. Unexpectedly, although he took the lead, someone else followed closely behind him. A dark green shadow suddenly swept out from the crowd like a cheetah pouncing on its prey. A cold dagger flashed in its sleeve and fiercely stabbed toward Chu Wanning's back, as if it wanted to stop him from moving. "Shizun! Shizun!" 2 cries of alarm came from Xuemeng and Shimei. However, they were too far away to help. There was a piercing sound. It was the sound of a blade entering flesh. Xuemeng closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his face was pale. He looked in that direction with an ashen complexion. He was stunned. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 231. Mount Jiaogai Yesek struggles. Surprisingly, Chu Wanning wasn't injured. In that split second, it was Mo Ran who reacted quickly and stood in front of the figure with the dark green cloak fluttering in the wind. That person's dagger had already sunk into his shoulder, leaving only the hilt with a silver snake pattern on it. Mo Ran's robes were instantly dyed red with blood, particular on the shoulder part. He lowered his eyebrows and clenched his teeth. His eyes flashed with a cold light. Those were the fierce eyes of a falcon when it finally killed a cunning rabbit. Grandmaster Hua. He suddenly tightened his grip on Hua Binan's hand that was still holding the dagger. Enduring the pain, he pulled the dagger out of his own flesh. His forehead was covered in fine beads of cold sweat, but he still clenched his teeth and mocked, "You dare sneak attack my Shizun from behind? Do you think I'm dead and won't do anything about it?" The night wind blew, ruffling the green gauze that Hua Binan had put on again to cover his disfigured face. Hua Binan was silent for a moment, then said, "How long has Grandmaster Mo been suspecting me?" "Ever since you were poisoned and stayed on the mountainside." Hua Binan chuckled. "Oh, that was something I couldn't do anything about. After all, I was hoping to kill a group of people in the main hall." Mo Ran gritted his teeth and said, "Why did you try to stop Su Xuanglin earlier? What else could I do? Let the formation take shape and let him realize that the rebirth formation that he worked so hard to set up was fake? Wouldn't that be big trouble?" At this time, Chu Wanning had already struck down Tianwen, directly at the center of this mysterious array. However, as soon as it landed, he was shocked to find that the spiritual aura of this array was so strong that it couldn't be easily suppressed. When he turned around, he saw Mo Ran standing behind him, his shoulder injured by Hua Binan's dagger. He couldn't help but feel anxious. "Mo Ran. Don't worry about me," Mo Ran said. "Destroying that array is more important. I'll defend this place." Chu Wanning couldn't do anything about it. Inside the secret array, there was a vicious flow of spirit chi that he had never encountered before. Even the heavenly rift at Kaidi town couldn't compare to it. He continued to pour his spiritual energy into Tianwen, but the most he could was to prevent the array from continuing to develop. He had no way to make it disappear. On the other side, Zhang Shi suddenly understood what was happening, but he couldn't believe that the Hanlin divine hands of his sect had an ulterior motive behind his back. He couldn't help but feel defeated. After a while, he said, "Hua Binan, you." At this moment, Hua Binan's hand was being held tightly by Mo Ran. He didn't turn around, but when he heard Zhang Shi's voice, he smiled faintly and said, "Sect leader, don't act rashly. Ga Yu sect have a rule that says always be mindful of everything. Naturally, I've kept that in mind. So along the way, I've looked for opportunities to plant a heart drill worm on many people that I've carefully raised for many years." Everyone's expression changed in horror. After a moment of silence, the place became akin to that of a pot of boiling porridge. Did the Hanlin divine hand plant a worm on their bodies? It didn't hurt or itch, and they didn't even feel anything before. But suddenly, they felt like their entire bodies were itching, as if there was a heart drill worm hiding in every corner of their bodies that could take their lives at any moment. "Hua Binan, you're mad. You're so vicious." Some people cried out anxiously, rubbing their bodies. "Where is it? Where is it? Did I get hit? I didn't have any contact with him at all. I don't think I have it on me." There was also someone with a straightforward temperament who couldn't stand Hua Binan's despicable methods. He shouted angrily, "You with the surname Hua. Don't try to confuse the crowd with your lies. There are so many cultivators here and they're all the best in their respective sects. Do you think they'll be afraid of a threat like you?" Before he could finish speaking though, Hua Binan lightly waved his hand. The man who provoked him suddenly swayed and then his eyes bulged. He grabbed his own throat and fell to the ground. He kept rolling around, shouting, "Ah! Ah!" Pus and blood quickly gushed out from his nose and eyes. His eyes rolled back, and he spasmed violently. Feces and urine flowed all over his crotch, emitting a foul stench. He soon stopped moving and fell limp to the ground. His skin quickly shriveled while his mouth was still open. A red worm that had been full of human blood crawled out. It looked like a spider, but it had 10 thin legs on each side. This shocking occurrence made many people who were originally filled with righteous indignation and wanted to denounce Huabinan change their expressions. Their faces turned ashen as they silently stared at the scene before them. Although the worm is small, it can take a person's life in an instant. Huabinan said gently, if you don't want to repeat the tragedy of the Rufeng sect being destroyed overnight, it's best for you to stay where you are. Don't be anxious and don't cause trouble. Just listen to my instructions obediently. Especially people from Gaiyuye sect. His gaze fell on Jiangxi, and then he looked at the group of the Gaiyuye sect cultivators behind Jiangxi, who were dressed in light green robes. He smiled and said, in consideration that we're from the same sect, I don't want to harm any one of you. Jiangxi's face turned ashen. Huabinan. You actually have such high ambitions. Oh, I won't really put it that way. Huabinan seemed to have suddenly thought of something and said to Jiangxi, oh right, sect leader, you also have a heart-drilling worm on you. The others' cultivation levels are low, and the worm can take their lives in the blink of an eye. But sect leader's cultivation level is high, so I think you'll be able to hold on for at least 10 days to half a month. Jiangxi said coldly, Gaiyuye hasn't mistreated you in the past 10 years. What exactly are your intentions? Of course, I have my reasons, but I don't necessarily have to tell you all. He turned to look at Chu Wanning, and then at Mo Ran, who was facing him. Then he turned his face back. All right, you all can't tell who has the worm and who doesn't, but there's a 50-50th possibility. It's a matter of life and death. I think that if you're smart enough, you'll know who to side with. Dead silence. Then a gentle and clear voice suddenly sounded from the crowd. Shi Mei stood beside Xuemeng and said, the heart-drilling worm follows the fire. If you ignite a fire spell or a fire talisman in your hand and you see a protrusion under your skin, then you'll know if you have the heart-drilling worm in you. If not, then you will be safe. Hanlin Divine Hands narrowed his eyes. Shi Mingjing, you secretly read my scriptures. Shi Mei's face seemed to redden, but it wasn't obvious. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. Now that so many people were looking at him, his expression was a bit stiff. During the 5 years of my Shizun seclusion, I've requested to be sent to Gaiyuye to seek knowledge. I didn't read the senior's scriptures, but I accidentally found this kind of worm, so I did some research. Huabinan said angrily, you're so shameless to steal someone else's work. Xuemeng frowned and immediately supported Shi Mei. What right does a two-faced person like you to talk about shame? As he said this, he immediately copied Shi Mei's actions. Seeing that there was no abnormality under his skin, he was overjoyed. He pulled Shi Mei and said, that's great, thank you. Look, I don't have any worm in me. Seeing this, the others all followed suit. For a moment, the soul summoning platform was filled with, I don't have any. Or what should I do? I have the heart-drilling worm. Huabinan closed his eyes and then laughed coldly. Even if you can tell who has them and who doesn't, so what? Those who have been infected by the heart-drilling worm, listen up. Come to my side and help me take down Chu Wanning and defeat Mo Weiyu. Of course, I won't treat you badly. Otherwise. He pointed at the cultivator on the ground who had been bitten to death by the heart-drilling worm. This is your fate. Under the threat, the first to defect was a female cultivator from Gaiyuye sect. She rushed to Huabinan's side in front of everyone's eyes. She raised her head slightly, her expression somewhat arrogant. Mo Ran was also surprised. A traitor actually had the cheek to be arrogant. Apologies, sect leader Zhang. She said, I'm not siding with Hanlin just to protect myself. It's because I've always admired the Hanlin Divine Hand's talents. The reason why I've joined the Gaiyuye sect is also because I admire his reputation. Today, let's not talk about whether or not I was infected. Even if I wasn't, I willingly follow the Hanlin Divine Hands. As she spoke, she glanced at Huabinan's expression. Although Hua Binan was fighting with Mo Ran, he was still smiling. It was obvious that he was satisfied with her words. She couldn't help but feel relieved. She tried even harder to persuade them. Senior Divine Hand has already said that he won't make things difficult for us on account that we're from the same sect. Everyone should know what to do. She waited for a while, but only 3 cultivators from Gaiyuye sect came to stand beside her. The others glared at them angrily, scowling coldly. The 3 cultivators each had their own declaration. Sect leader Zhang, Gaiyuye sect is getting worse and worse these years. If it weren't for the Hanlin Divine Hands, I would have left long ago. The Hanlin Divine Hands is skillful. We should only follow the capable. Some people from Gaiyuye sect couldn't stand it anymore. They said angrily, "Traitor! How dare you say that? That's right. Traitor! You have no integrity. Get out of Gaiyuye sect." The woman didn't expect that so many people would refuse to submit even after being poisoned by the heart-drilling worm. She looked very embarrassed. Though her face was still red, she forced herself to calm down and said, "I don't need you to say that. We've long decided not to stay in this lousy sect. If you follow Jiangxi, you'll be a lonely soul following a ghost." She turned her head and glared at her former sect leader. Ling Biran, from now on, Gaiyuye and Jiangxi, I'll cut." Before she could finish her declaration, she was interrupted by Jiangxi. Jiangxi was expressionless. His eyes were cold as he looked at her disdainfully. "Who are you?" I'm Ling Biran. I won't remember your name even if you say it hundreds of times in front of me every day." Jiangxi said, "Get lost." That female Gaiyuye sect disciple was very angry. She bit her lower lip for a while and said indignantly, I didn't expect a sect leader to be like this. Are you only seeing me today?" Jiangxi sneered. "Besides, Gaiyuye sect has thousands of disciples. This is the first time I'm seeing you. To be honest, if it weren't for the situation today, you might not even have the chance to speak to me in this lifetime." With that, he flicked his sleeve and a gust of fragrant wind blew. Jiangxi had already started fighting with Hua Binan. Hua Binan already had the extremely difficult Mo Ran in front of him. Now that Jiangxi was here, it was obvious that he couldn't bear the situation anymore. In a moment of desperation, he activated a wave of heart-drilling worms. Everyone present who had the worms in their bodies immediately felt as if they were being bitten by thousands of ants. They were in unbearable pain. Save me." Jiangxi's figure also paused. However, he was indeed the sect leader of Gaiyuye sect. He immediately tapped several of his vital acupoints and temporarily alleviated the pain. His face was still pale as he continued to fight with Mo Ran against Hua Binan. Hua Binan was not stupid. He crooked his finger and released the heart-drilling worms from the 3 people who had defected to him. He said sternly, "Accept the challenge." In the midst of the pain, some of the people with weak minds saw that surrendering to Hua Binan would save them from the torture, so they all rushed over. In a split second, a small portion of the people in the crowd actually knelt down and shouted to Hua Binan, "I beg the Hanlin Divine Hands. Release the curse. We are willing to serve you. I can't take it anymore. It's too painful, please, Senior Hua." Hua Binan smiled slightly in the midst of the fierce battle. He looked at Mo Ran, who was fighting fiercely with him, and said, "So, Grandmaster Mo, look. In the end, the most powerful sect in the world is still the Gaiyuye sect." Before he finished speaking, Jiangxi had already pulled out his Suihuang. He said sternly, "How can a person like you, who is used to using underhanded methods, be worthy of the Gaiyuye sect?" After he finished speaking, he said to Mo Ran, "Go to the array and help your Shizun. I'll hold him off here." Hua Binan sneered, "Sect leader, are you determined to be my enemy today? Cut the crap. You still want to fight with me even though you've been poisoned with the worm?" Sect leader Zhang Yechen, you're really tired of living. Zhang Shi's face darkened as he replied, it's not up to you to decide whether my life is long or short. If I don't stop you today, I'm afraid the reputation of the Gaiyuye sect will be ruined. After he finished speaking, the two people who were proficient in using poison had already exchanged each other's moves. Between the sword and the blade, there were even poisonous powders and sedatives that countered each other. Mo Ran saw that Zhang Shi was not powerless to fight back, so he immediately turned around and rushed to Chu Wanning's side to help. Who knew that halfway there, a dozen dark yellow figures would pounce on him? Mo Ran gritted his teeth. Huang Xiaoyu. These people were Huang Xiaoyu and Zhang Donghal's high-level disciples. Huang Xiaoyu stood in the wind with his loose robes and large sleeves. He stroked his beard and said, Grandmaster Mo, the heart-drilling worm is not a joke. I'm like a fish on a chopping block. In the face of life and death, I can only be your enemy. Apologies for the offense. He was not the only one. There were also experts from other sects who could not bear this kind of pain. They all rushed over. At this time, the soul summoning platform was already a mess. The cultivators from various sects were fighting among themselves. Those who were poisoned by the cursed worms and those who were not, those who had betrayed them and those who had not. Everyone was confronting each other. For a moment, Zhang Shi and Hua Binan were fighting with all their strength. Mo Ran was the last line of defense in front of Chu Wanning, so he was attacked from the front and back. He was confronting Huang Xiaoyu and the other cultivators one after another. Chu Wanning, on the other hand, was using all of his spiritual power to battle the mysterious array. On the other side, Xue Zhenyang and the people from Shisheng Peak were guarding the front line, preventing more defectors from approaching Chu Wanning, who was trying to seal the mysterious array. Shi Mei was running among the cultivators who had been poisoned by the heart-drilling worm but refused to defect. He was trying to cure the worm curse for them. It hurts. Kill me, I beg you to kill me. Shi Mei bent down and picked up a young man who was rolling on the ground. The young man grabbed his hand and cried, it hurts so much but I don't want to defect. I won't be a betrayer. Just kill me. I beg you, kill me. Kill me. Bear with it. Shi Mei comforted him while placing his fingertips on the young man's pulse. I can't take it anymore. Look at me, look into my eyes. But the young man did not listen to Shi Mei at all. His fingers were tightly clenched, and his whole body was twitching like a fish that had been taken out of the water. He gasped for breath, I can't take it anymore. Shi Mei had no choice but to force the young man's face to face and lift his tightly closed eyelids. This was not easy because the young man kept kicking and struggling, leaving red marks on the back of Shi Mei's hand. Look at me, look at me. The young man was barely called back to his senses. He panted and turned his eyes, looking at Shi Mei with tears in his eyes. Shi Mei silently recited the incantation and stared into the young man's eyes. Suddenly, the young man shivered and felt something quickly climbing up his waist. Soon, it climbed to his chest, throat, and mouth. Ugh! He suddenly turned over, and with a strong feeling of nausea, he vomited a big puddle of vomit. The smell was very pungent, and there was a red heart drill worm in it that kept spasming. Shi Mei pointed in the air and immediately cut the worm into pieces. He suddenly stood up and shouted, the heart drill worm can be controlled by the eye healing technique. I can help you to do it. He ran around and shouted anxiously, stop fighting. Don't kill each other. It can be cured. The curse can be undone. But in the chaotic battle, not many people listened to him. His voice was not loud in the first place. Soon it was drowned out by the shouts, howls, explosions and collisions. Zhang Shi heard Shi Mei's shout and froze. Eye healing technique. Like many insects, when some poisonous insects entered the body, as long as the corresponding eye healing technique was used to guide them out of the body, they would be lured out of the body like moths to a flame. The poison of the cursed insect would then be neutralized. Hua Binan obviously heard it too. He cursed in his heart, and his eyes flashed with a fierce cold light. Along the way, I killed all the Gaiyuye cultivators who knew eye healing technique. I didn't expect that on this shabby Shisheng peak, there would be someone who knows this kind of high-level medical grandmaster technique. It's really. The blade in his hand violently clashed against Jiangshi Suihuang, and sparks flew when they collided. Hua Binan gritted his teeth and said, "Young man, you're really good." Suddenly, he withdrew his sword. Then, his entire body swept backwards like a bat and leaped into the midst of the fierce battle. Oh no! Jiangshi was startled as he saw through Hua Binan's intention. He was just about to gather his chi to catch up when the heart-drilling worm in his body acted up. His chest constricted and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. He stabbed his sword into the ground and knelt down. His blood-soaked lips opened and closed as he watched Hua Binan leave. He wanted to warn the others, but he couldn't make a louder sound. Dang! Xin. Shi Mei was helping a cultivator of Kunlun Taxu Palace who was poisoned with the worm. After the cultivator vomited out the heart-drilling worm, he no longer felt the pain in his heart. He quickly stood up and shouted with Shi Mei. "Stop fighting! Come over here for treatment and detoxify the curse. It can be cured." Xuemeng was also busy trying to stop the fight. He dragged a dozen people to Shi Mei's side and kept shouting to them, "It's all right. It's all right. You will be cured now. No need to cry out in pain. You'll be attended to shortly by my Shidi whose skills are top-notch. His healing ability is no worse than that of Gai Yuyesek's disciples, I." Xuemeng paused to call out to Shi Mei, but the moment he looked up, his words were abruptly cut off. "Shi Mei. Behind you." End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 232. Mount Jiao Insignificant Eyes. Xuemeng let out a wretched cry as he pounced towards Shi Mei. But it was too late. Hua Binan was like the king of hell, like the god of death. He flew through the air and grabbed Shi Mei's neck from behind. "Shi Mei. Shi Mingjeng." The elders of Shisheng Peak, as well as Xuemeng, all turned their heads. Hua Binan had already brought Shi Mei with him on his sword and rose into the air. Under the bright moon in the sky, he coldly looked down at the chaotic crowd below. Xuemeng was about to go crazy. He stepped on Long Cheng and chased after Hua Binan, but halfway through, he was forced to stop by the killer bees that Hua Binan threw out. Unable to deal with them, he could only fall back to the ground and stagger. Hua Binan held Shi Mei's neck, his slender finger wearing the spirit serpent ring slowly stroking his throat. Suddenly, with a clang, a long spike shot out from the spirit serpent ring, flashing with a cold light. The eye healing technique is extremely difficult to learn. Hua Binan said slowly. This little friend is so young and he is not a disciple of Gai Yuye sect. To be able to use the eye healing technique so skillfully, he must be very talented. How could the people fighting on the ground not notice his actions? For a moment, whether it was Xue Zhengyang, Mo Ran, or even Chu Wanning in front of the barrier, they all clearly saw Shi Mei being captured by Hua Binan. Mo Ran's eyes suddenly narrowed. In his anger and anxiety, a ghostly red light flashed. It actually forced Huang Xiaoyu and more than 10 people back several feet. A few unlucky people were even directly knocked off the cliff of the spirit summoning platform. In the boundless sea of clouds, they fell without even making a sound as they were swallowed up. Hua Binan. Let him go. Shi Mei's face was pale. He lowered his head to look at Mo Ran and Xuemeng. He pursed his lips and finally said, "Go help Shizun. Don't worry about me." Shi Mei. Chu Wanning stood in front of the array, his face as white as a sheet. His hands trembled uncontrollably, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. His heart was in his throat. Shi Mei's gaze turned and landed on him. There was a trace of sadness in his eyes. Shizun. What a coincidence. Hua Binan was stunned for a moment, then smiled. I just casually grabbed and caught Grandmaster Chu's disciple. Chu Wanning. It's no wonder that this one had already accomplished so much at such a young age. Hua Binan wasn't stingy with his praise. He's such a good disciple. As a teacher, don't you feel bad for him? Hua Binan. If you hurt him, I'll make you pay for it. So, you're saying that Grandmaster doesn't intend to do anything today? Hua Binan smiled and whispered into Shimei's ear, did you hear that? Between saving you and sealing the array, he chose the latter. Shimei closed his eyes. His lips trembled, but he didn't say a word. Hua Binan laughed loudly, if that's the case, I feel sorry for this little friend. You've become a disciple of a Grandmaster, but he valued righteousness more than his disciple's life. Shi Mingjing, you're really pitiful. The wind whistled around them. No one answered for a long time. Perhaps it was because his life was hanging by a thread, but Shimei slowly opened his eyes in the silence. He said, Shizun, I'm sorry. I know. You may recall that I have done some things in the past out of selfishness. Even now, I'm not sure if those things were right or wrong. But I feel that I don't deserve to be Shizun's disciple. There are many times when I can't sacrifice my life for the sake of righteousness. Shimei. On the high platform, Xuemeng heard him say this and couldn't help but think of the night when Chu Wanning died. Huizhui ordered them to go to the underworld to save their master, but Shimei hesitated and didn't agree quickly. Mo Ran thought of the bowl of wontons that year. He thought of that restaurant when Shimei bowed and told him apologetically that the bowl of wontons was made by Chu Wanning. What about Chu Wanning? Chu Wanning thought of Jinjinj Lakes when they went to look for holy weapon. Shimei lamented that he couldn't obtain a holy weapon. Other than that, he couldn't think of any other regrets Shimei may have. Shimei had always been a gentle, perfect, and amenable. He was like a new snowfall in the cold winter, pure white and without a speck of dirt. Therefore, even the slightest bit of dust on the snowy ground or even the slightest bit of blooming plum blossom, would particularly stand out in it. As a result, whether it was his fault, his hesitation, or his occasional selfishness, they were all so obvious and unforgettable. However, he was also a very ordinary person. He was not a stone statue or a silk painting. He also had his own personal feelings. But no one really knew him. For Xuemeng, Shimei was a friend. He felt that this friend should follow him, support him, and accompany him. For the old Mo Ran, Shimei was the object of admiration and thought of him to be hallowed, tolerant, warm, and impeccable. For Chu Wanning, Shimei was his disciple. He was gentle, approachable, and had a tolerance and forbearance that Chu Wanning envied and admired. At this time, they suddenly realized that all this time, Shimei had been Xuemeng's close friend and follower. He had been Mo Ran's infatuation that he grew past out of. He had been Chu Wanning's most inconspicuous and unremarkable disciple. The only thing he hadn't been to them, was himself. Hua Binan laughed coldly. Do you have any last words? Hua Binan, let him go. Don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. Sure. Hua Binan said, if all of you surrender and wait for death, I naturally won't take his life. The array in front of Chu Wanning's eyes flickered. It was obvious that the array had reached a critical point of existence. Whether it would be sealed or exploded would depend on the next move. He didn't withdraw the strength in his hand, but his hand was trembling slightly. This wasn't the heavenly rift. The choice has to be made in a flash and there was no time to think further. This was like putting a knife on his disciple's neck, letting him hesitate, letting him see with his own eyes, making him feel unbearable pain. Hua Binan lifted his chin slightly and chuckled. What do you think? The array has been opened, so you can fight again. But if this knife cuts, it will be extremely difficult to come back to life. Grandmaster, you should think about things carefully. At this moment, Shimei spoke. His voice wasn't very loud, but it was still clear. Actually, I don't like eating candied haws. Hua Binan lowered his head and stared at him, as if he didn't understand what he meant. Shimei didn't cry. Shimei actually smiled slightly as he looked at his close friend, his old friend and his Shizun below. I don't like eating candied haws, but young master, when we were young, you always asked me to help you eat them. What I wanted to cultivate the most was the boundary technique. Unfortunately, Shizun thinks that I'm not talented enough and isn't willing to teach me too much of it. His gaze fell on Mo Ran. Aran, I actually know what you wanted to say that day at Kaidi Town during the Heavenly Rift incident. Mo Ran was suddenly stunned and looked at him blankly. Shimei still smiled gently and peacefully. But after Shizun came back, you never wanted to let me know the other half of your declarations then. In the restaurant, I saw the two of you eating together. When I looked at your eyes, I knew that you would never say those words anymore. Mo Ran. I'm actually very envious of young master, and I'm also very envious of Shizun, Shimei said softly. Can you please not think that I'm annoying because of my envy? I've never thought that you were annoying before. Xuemeng shouted anxiously. His eyes couldn't help but redden. I didn't know that you don't like candied haws. I really didn't know. Shimei. Hua Binan was getting impatient. He grabbed Shimei by the neck and stared at Chu Wanning. He said sternly, I'll count to 3. If you don't stop, I'll destroy him. No. Xuemeng turned around in a panic and shouted anxiously at Chu Wanning. Shizun, please stop first. We can't let something happen to Shimei right in front of us. Just stop. 1. The trembling of Chu Wanning's fingers went from almost undetectable to clearly visible to everyone. He looked at Shimei. His usually sharp phoenix eyes met with his usually gentle peach blossom eyes. His phoenix eyes moistened. 2. Shat. At this moment, blood splattered everywhere. Xuemeng and Mo Ran's shouts were like sharp swords that pierced through the roof. Shimei. You don't have to count to 3. Blood dripped down. Shimei raised his hand and covered his eyes. He hadn't cried from the beginning to the end. But at this moment, blood flowed out from his eyes through the gaps between his fingers and trickled down his cheeks. When Hua Binan counted to 2, he ran straight into the cold spike that Hua Binan had placed in front of him and brushed past it. Hua Binan was shocked. He wanted to pull back his hand, but the spike deviated by a few inches. The sharp blade that was originally going to cut Shimei's neck brushed past his eyes. In an instant, both of his eyes were damaged. Under Yu Heng's lead, no one has ever surrendered, nor would we ever be weak. Shimei. The clamor split the clouds. Chu Wanning's heart was also greatly shaken. He had already used all of his strength. Now that he saw his disciple destroy his own eyes with blood flowing out of his face, his hands couldn't help but soften. The array suddenly backfired at this moment. A wave of spirit energy violently surged out from the crack and hit him squarely in the chest, sending him flying several meters away. Chu Wanning violently coughed up a mouthful of blood, but he didn't have the time to take care of himself. He turned his hand and tried to repair the formation, but it was too late. Hua Binan was stunned for a moment, then laughed loudly. He grabbed Shimei's collar and pulled him up. His eyes flashed with joy. I didn't expect you to be so useful. It seems that it would be a pity if I killed you. Hua Binan, what are you going to do? Hua Binan didn't answer. He only glanced at Xuemeng, then turned his gaze to the mysterious black barrier that was rapidly cracking open. He smiled and said, this array has been created with the combined efforts of so many people. It's finally going to open. Everyone, this is the first time I've activated this array in my life. I'm just giving it a try. I don't know what will happen next. As he spoke, he quickly lowered his sword and brought Shimei down to the entrance of the soul summoning platform. When he disappeared in front of the entrance, he threw out a final sentence to the crowd. You people can stay here and have fun. This Mount Jiao is so grand. It's not a bad thing to use it as your burial ground. Almost at the same time, a deafening sound came from the sky. The array was like ink spilled on a piece of paper, quickly spreading out and swallowing half of the sky in the blink of an eye. Even the moon was covered by the darkness behind it. What's going on? What kind of array is this? Isn't this a heavenly rift? No, this doesn't have the indication of a heavenly rift. The people who were fighting fiercely just now were like grasshoppers on the same boat. They all raised their heads in alarm to look at the pitch-black opening in the sky. Perhaps this could no longer be called a rift. Above the soul summoning platform, half of the sky had already cracked open. A dull and rapid vibrations came from the bottomless darkness. Huang Xiaoyu's face was sallow. His nostrils flared as he said, "This is... Is there a monster coming out from behind? Why is there such a big commotion?" Mo Ran took the lead and stood at the front with Jiangui in his hand. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed across the night sky. Rumble. Heavenly thunder void break. It split open. There's something behind. Something's coming out. Is it a malicious ghost? Xuemeng saw that Mo Ran and Chu Wanning were too close to the dark crack. He wiped the tears from his face and was about to run toward his cousin and Shizun. However, he was grabbed by Xue Zhenyang and pulled behind him. "Father! Don't go. Stay there. I don't want to. I want to stay with Shizun and my brother." Xue Zhenjiang's eyes were unprecedentedly sharp. He didn't allow Xuemeng to refuse. "Do you want to die? Do you know?" The rest of his words fell like dry twigs. He was stunned and didn't say anything else. Xuemeng cried, "Father, I want to help them. Shimei has been taken away. I can't hide behind you and watch them get hurt. Please." Before Xue Zhenyang could reply, green smoke and lightning hissed from the center of the pitch-black array. A layer of smoke and clouds surged out from within. When they got closer, they saw that it was a group of black-clothed cultivators with masks on their faces. They stepped on their swords and descended from the sky amidst the thunder and lightning. It was impossible to tell which sect they belonged to or where exactly did they come from. The man in the lead wore a luxurious cloak embroidered with gold and silver threads. He wore a hood and a ferocious silver-gray mask that covered his face. He stood in the air with his hands clasped behind his back. Wind blew in all directions and clouds gathered around him. Even though he didn't say a word, he emitted an immeasurable murderous aura. "What the hell is this?" Xue Zhenyang was stunned. The others who hadn't seen much of the world couldn't say a word. They just stared blankly at the sky. Was it a ghost? But no, there was no such ghost as this. More and more people flew out of the black clouds on their swords. There were dozens of people, hundreds of people. In the end, they stood in the clouds, their number were on par with the cultivators on the ground. There were almost 1,000 of them. Xue Zhenyang shuddered. After a while, he gathered his breath and shouted, "Are you a human or a ghost? Why don't you tell us who you are?" The man in the lead rolled his eyes. When his gaze fell on Xue Zhenyang, there was a meaningful look in his eyes. "Say something. Do you understand what we're saying?" Xuemeng also shouted. The man didn't say anything. He paused for a moment and raised a pale and slender hand. Then, he waved his hand and spoke concisely. "Kill them." End chapter.